Jacob Gershwin was born on September 26, 1898 in Brooklyn, New York. Better known as George Gershwin, his syncopated rhythms and catchy tunes captivated Americans throughout the Roaring Twenties. Throughout his career, Gershwin's writing style was hard to define with its classical roots and jazz overlays. His blend of genres was quite controversial because jazz was considered a black exclusive style due to racial discrimination in the early 1900s. However, he continued to pioneer and innovate, becoming an instrumental influence to the 1920s jazz age. While Gershwin was making a name for himself, he encountered many mixed opinions and harsh critics that attempted to shut down his right to glory. His career was short-lived, but he left an incredible legacy that included a multitude of contributions that were not only famous, but were also some of the best American written compositions. Gershwin's music has lasted through the ages and still captivates us to this day. George Gershwin grew up in New York and lived in tenement housing with his poor family of six. Around where he lived, Gershwin could listen to African American Harlem Street performers, free classical concerts, Broadway shows, and more. When George was 12, his family bought a piano. It was mainly intended for his older brother Ira, but his parents were pleasantly surprised when George was able to play already, for he had been practicing piano without his family's knowledge at a friend's house. George's parents then decided that he would be the recipient of piano lessons instead of Ira from the teacher Charles Hambitzer. During the lessons, Hambitzer had noted George's enthusiasm as well as his talent, so much that he had refused payment from him altogether. He once wrote in a letter that, "I have a new pupil who will make his mark if anybody will. The boy is a genius." Although Gershwin had wanted to learn more modern jazz and popular music, Hambitzer insisted having him practice classical works from composers such as Liszt, Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and Debussy, which gave him a solid musical background. This combination of musical interests created the unique style of Gershwin that people know and love today. Not everyone was a fan of Gershwin, though. There were those who saw his work as unprecedented and innovative, believing he had created true works of art. Then there were those who believed he'd simply mashed music genres together, slapped them onto a sheet of paper, and called it his own. Gershwin encountered his fair share of criticisms during his life. People of varying backgrounds often said negative opinions about his work, such as it was not real music because his use of jazz was not a norm in society. Gershwin was then criticized even further by members of the African American community that claimed he derived all of his own music from Blue Notes of the Harlem pianist, which was not necessarily true. Blue Notes was also used in Yiddish theater music, which Gershwin would oftentimes listen to as a child. African American musicians such as Duke Ellington also disliked Gershwin's use of inauthentic black idioms in his works like Porgy and Bess. His use of these unfamiliar styles made him beloved but also infamous. Other composers of the time, more often than not, would give his works harsh reviews. This, however, could stem from the fact that the other composers envied Gershwin for his easy success. Regardless, the majority of common folk of the time absolutely loved Gershwin and his work. Early in George Gershwin's career, he composed a jazz opera titled Blue Monday, later renamed to 135th Street. It turned out to be a commercial failure, but had caught the attention of conductor Paul Whiteman, known as the King of Jazz by popular media, as well as being one of the premier band leaders of the 1920s. Whiteman, impressed with Gershwin, had commissioned a symphonic jazz piece to be played at his upcoming concert, an experiment in modern music. Gershwin was initially unmoved by Whiteman's request and did not provide him with a definite answer. However, 5 weeks prior to the concert, Ira, George's brother, read in the New York Tribune that an original composition written by George was to be featured in the impending concert. Knowing the influence that Whiteman had in the musical world, Gershwin began searching for ideas when he came across a clarinet passage in his tune book, which he thought would make a fitting opening to the piece. Along with that, he drew inspiration from the sounds of a train on a trip to Boston. All too soon, the date of the concert had arrived, yet Gershwin had not completed the piece. With concepts and ideas in mind, he would improvise segments of his piano solos and with just a nod of the head would alert Whiteman to proceed with the piece. His improvisations separated his piece greatly from the many monotonous arrangements that had preceded it. The piece was a complete success and saved the entire concert, thus proving to not only the audience but the public that jazz is a true form of music and was worth their time. In 1913, at the age of 15, Gershwin dropped out of high school and picked up a job in Tin Pan Alley for the Jerome Remick Music Publishing Company, where he had become a song plugger, a person that demonstrates sheet music for incoming buyers and passerbys. While working this job, Gershwin became acquainted with what types of songs were more successful than others, which would later help him in his career. Gershwin's first original song was entitled When You Want 'Em, You Can't Have 'Em, and When You Have 'Em, You Don't Want 'Em, which only made him about 50 cents. He later wrote Swanee, which was an instant hit. It not only made $10,000 in royalties for each collaborator, but also gained him the attention of Broadway writers. After having the beginnings of a successful career, Gershwin eventually decided to travel to Paris for a short period of time to study composition under a few different tutors, but was unfortunately rejected by the likes of Maurice Ravel and Nadia Boulanger. While in Paris, he wrote An American in Paris, and at first it was not very popular, but quickly it became a musical standard in both the United States and Europe. When the piece was completed, Gershwin grew tiresome and bored of Europe and decided to head home to the United States. His next great masterpiece was to be a musical titled Porgy and Bess. Despite its brilliance, it was not recognized at the time and became a commercial failure and received many bleak reviews. This was due to the fact that the piece was cut short to meet the requirements for the Broadway format. Almost a century later, it finally got the recognition it deserved when modern musical scholars revisited the piece and saw it for all it was worth. Although George Gershwin had an untimely end to a short career, he collected many accolades and left a legacy that has lasted through the ages. He was awarded a Pulitzer Prize posthumously for his distinguished and enduring contributions to music, and his compositions for Of Thee I Sing helped win the first Pulitzer Award for a musical in the category of drama. His gift, Strike of the Band, is still used by UCLA to this day, and United Airlines still uses Rhapsody in Blue in their commercials. He was one of only 4 songwriters to receive a Congressional Gold Medal. George Gershwin lived only 38 years before his abrupt death on July 11, 1937 due to a brain tumor. In that short amount of time, he accomplished more than most humans do in a lifetime. He explored the boundaries of classical and jazz to create a bond that would shatter misconceptions and awe the masses. He encountered problems such as commercial failure and constant criticism from all fronts and continuously faced it head on. He dedicated his musical talent to the world and received our love in exchange. He played a great role in expanding the public view of jazz and forced musicians to take the genre seriously regardless of their race. However, Gershwin did not easily turn the public opinion of jazz as he encountered much opposition from harsh critics and the unsure public.